Many teams have fallen off during Formula One's time, but no team has been as consistently bad as Sauber. From being second place in the Constructors' Championship and Massa and Räikkönen driving for them, to scoring no points in 2014 and being at the back of the field ever since. What exactly went wrong with Sauber? Today, we're finding out. See, before they even got to F1, Sauber was actually winning stuff in sports cars. Started out in 1970 building these mental little hill climb cars, but they worked! Peter Sauber realized there was more money in sports cars, so he went on to build those instead. By the late 80s, they were quick. Won the World Sports Prototype Championship in 1989 and 1990 with Mercedes power. The C11 sports car they built in 1990 was an absolute weapon. Thing looked like a spaceship and went fast. Won pretty much everything that year. Le Mans 24 Hours was the only one that got away, probably because the French weren't having any of that Swiss precision nonsense. But that success got Mercedes interested in F1. Then there's the C291 from 91. They stuck a flat 12 engine in it that was basically F1 tech in a sports car. Thing was quick when it worked, but it spent more time in the garage than on track. The funny thing is, by 1991, Mercedes was so impressed with Sauber, they were basically treating them like their works team, gave them all this fancy tech and support. When they moved up to F1 in 1993, they weren't messing about. Got themselves this sneaky little deal with Mercedes, well, technically Ilmor, but that's just Mercedes using a different name. Stuck these V10 engines in their C12, and would you believe it? Finished 6th in their first season. Had JJ Leto and Carl Windlinger driving, proper quick pair of lads. Leto even got them their first points in South Africa, finished 4th. The C12 was an awesome car too. Adrian Newey might have been designing the Williams that year, but Sauber's car had some clever bits. Even had active suspension for a bit, though that wasn't reliable. But here's the mental bit. Mercedes was still playing it cautious, didn't want their name on the engine yet. So Sauber's running around with these concept by Mercedes-Benz engines. Still insanely quick though, hitting 211 miles per hour down the straights at Monza. The mid-90s were bloody tough for the team. Carl Wendlinger, who was quick until he had this massive shunt in Monaco in 94. After Wendlinger's crash, they stuck Andrea De Cesaris in the car. Old school driver, known for binning it more often than not, but when he kept it on track, he was quick. Even had Frentzen drive for them, local champ, quick when the car wasn't falling apart. 95 was weird though. Mercedes gone off to McLaren, so Sauber got Ford engines now. The Ford V8 might have been down on power, but it was reliable. Sauber got themselves this young hotshot called Jean-Christophe Bouillon too. Quick in testing, but in races he struggled. Still, they managed to score points here and there, even had a 4th place in Italy with Frentzen. Then, in 96, they pulled off this mega deal with Petronas, got Ferrari engines with a different name slapped on them, had Johnny Herbert and Jean Alesi driving for them too, but here's where it gets proper interesting. Sauber had this weird talent for finding future champions when they were just starting out. In 2001, they grabbed this Finnish bloke called Kimi Räikkönen. Now this was mental. The guy had only done 23 car races in his entire life. Most teams wouldn't trust someone with that little experience to park their car, let alone race it, but Sauber saw something in him. Probably his ability to give one-word answers in interviews.
Yeah, maybe, but then...
McLaren nicked Räikkönen right after, but Sauber weren't bothered. They just went and found another future star, Felipe Massa, in 2002. Came in as this Brazilian hotshot, kept finding the gravel traps, but Sauber stuck with him. Ferrari were watching and nabbed him too. At this point, Sauber was basically running F1's greatest talent show. Then BMW showed up in 2006 with their German efficiency and money. Suddenly Sauber weren't just making up the numbers anymore. They were actually quick. In 2007, they finished 2nd in the Constructors' Championship. Though that was mostly because McLaren got caught with Ferrari's homework and got thrown out of the championship. 2008 was their peak though. Robert Kubica won the Canadian Grand Prix. Not just a lucky win either, he was leading the championship at one point. The car was quick, everything was working, but then BMW did something daft. They decided to focus on the 2009 car instead of fighting for the title. The 2009 car turned out to be slow. BMW took one look at their creation, looked at their bank balance during the financial crisis, and left quickly. Poor Peter Sauber had to come back and save his own team. Then 2012 rolled around, and bloody hell, what a year that turned out to be. Had this young Mexican lad called Sergio Perez who was absolutely rabid when it rained. Malaysia was the big one. He was hunting down Alonso's Ferrari. Would have won it too if he hadn't got a bit excited and binned it trying to pass. Still got 2nd though, which for Sauber was brilliant. Then they did it again in Monza. Perez started from bloody miles back, 12th on the grid, and somehow ended up on the podium again. The car was actually decent that year. The C31 had this clever little trick with the exhaust gases. Zhou designed their exhaust system to direct hot exhaust gases toward the rear diffuser, which helped increase downforce without a blown diffuser, which had been banned for 2012. The Coronda effect allows a fluid, in this case exhaust gases, to follow a curved surface instead of dispersing. By channeling this flow towards the floor, they improved rear-end stability and traction, giving the car an edge in races. Even Kobayashi got in on the act, got himself a podium in Japan, his home race. Scenes were mental, Japanese fans going absolutely bonkers. But 2013, that's when things started going really wrong. Lost Perez to McLaren, and their new car wasn't competitive. The C32 had this weird side pod design that looked revolutionary, but didn't work well. 2014 was even worse. First time in their history, they scored 0 points. The car was so bad, their lead designer took a leave of absence. Then in 2015, they hit rock bottom. Turned up to Australia with their drivers Nasser and Ericsson, not even sure if they'd get paid. Team was so skint, they were checking everywhere for spare change. But then, Nasser went and finished 5th. It came out of nowhere. 2016 to 2017 were not good, floating around at the back. Manor had gone bust, so at least they weren't last. Then Alfa Romeo came along in 2018, slapped their name on the car, and everyone thought they'd improve. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Yeah, they got Kimi back. The same Kimi they'd given his first drive to back in 2001. Getting back with an old driver after 17 years didn't work out well. The Alfa years were weird. Sometimes they looked decent. Kimi finished 4th in Brazil 2019, making everyone think they'd improved. But then they'd go and build an uncompetitive car. Giovinazzi came in, tried his best, crashed a bit, scored some points, crashed some more, Italian style. 2022 was supposed to be their fresh start with the new regs. Got Bottas in from Mercedes, won races and everything. Zhou came in too, first Chinese F1 driver. Good PR and all that, but the car wasn't competitive. 2023 was their last year as Alfa Romeo, and bloody hell, they made sure to go out poorly. The C43 was so bad, it made the previous year's car look fast. Bottas spent more time looking at the back of other cars than going forward. Things couldn't get any worse, right? Right, let me tell you about the absolute circus that was Kick Sauber's 2024 season.
Oh, he lost it into the barriers!
This moment, listening to the impact.
Somehow they've got a stake/kick sponsorship thing going on. Basically a gambling company trying to make itself look cool. C44 is basically what happens when you make all the mistakes designing an F1 car. The Aero's so bad. In the wind tunnel, they discovered the car produces minimal downforce. The rear end's twitchy, especially in high-speed corners, where you actually need the bloody thing to stick to the ground. The suspension? That's a laugh. They tried this fancy new front suspension design for 2024, probably thought they were being clever. Turns out it's not good. The moment it hits a curb, the whole car decides to do its own thing. And don't even get me started on the power unit integration. Yeah, they've got Ferrari engines which are decent, but they've managed to make them work poorly. The real comedy show though, that's in the pits. Whoever came up with their new lightweight wheel nut system needs reviewing. Here's what happened. Some bright spark thought, you know what would make pit stops faster? Making the wheel nuts lighter. Great idea in theory, but in practice, absolute disaster. In Bahrain, poor Bottas sat there for 52 seconds. The wheel nuts were cross-threading rapidly. In Australia, they somehow managed to make it even worse. 31.8 seconds for one stop. The tire degradation is another absolute shocker. The car eats through its rubber rapidly. They're having to manage the tires so much, it's barely racing. In Bahrain, they were losing nearly half a second per lap just from the rears going off. That's not tire management, that's excessive wear. And the chassis? They've somehow managed to build a car that's both overweight and fragile. The weight distribution's all wrong too. The chassis is supposedly built to be super stiff, but somehow they've managed to make it flex incorrectly. When the car hits the curbs, the whole thing twists too much. The drivers can't even feel what the car's doing half the time because the feedback's unclear. However, it's not only the technical stuff Sauber is failing at. Entire departments are composed of people who can't make any decisions. The best example is their race strategy department. Take the Saudi Arabia race. They brought Zhou in for his first stop based on timing data from their system that wasn't current. By the time they realized the data was wrong, half the grid had already passed them. Then there's the absolute masterpiece from Australia. Their timing screens were showing data from the wrong session. They were literally making strategy calls based on FP1 data during the race. Bottas ended up doing this mega long stint on hards that weren't even the right compound for the track temp. I'm sure 2025 will be another circus show with the Sauber team because they don't really want to change anything. Yes, they got Mattia Binotto now, but he's not known for his leadership and great changes in Ferrari, is he? He basically just failed there. Honestly, I think Audi should just drop the idea of buying Sauber. That's too much of nothing they're getting for their money. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.